sometimes I may feel like I'm in the back burner,
Right.
but it's not really that. It's we're evolving as humans, which is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
So yeah, you're marrying the unknown, and you know, again, like, how do men deal with that? How do women deal with that? So
Right.
it's never a thing where it's just a one script, one blueprint. You're
Right.
continuously trying to figure things out, communication, and I want to have real conversations about how people deal with these things.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. We are back inside the mind. I am your host, John Reese, and we have Elite in the building. I'm continuing this coaching series, man, and I'm very blessed to have this gentleman in the building. He started competing in 2002, stopped in 2009, which he can get into that if he chooses to, but he's been coaching ever since. He's turned over 130 athletes pro, man. That's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're not in complete control of everyone. So he's pretty much coaching all divisions, all the way up to bodybuilding, all the way down to bikini, and he has coached over 25 Olympians. Mr. Kash Guidry in the building. How you doing, sir?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm very blessed and rested. I'm taking this year off, so I ain't gotta worry about the gauntlets of prep. But I'm staying in good off season shape because I think I finally learned what it takes to be a pro. So
Yeah, man. It's finding that sweet spot of that off season. I always talk about it coming back from the old days when guys used to blow up and get big. And then nowadays, at least I know with my competitors, I always try to kind of stay very clean. It's all about adding quality,
yes,
size, and mass more so than quantity. In fact, I just made a post about that yesterday. So it's finding what works for you so that when you make that transition and start your prep, you're going to be setting yourself up for the best prep possible and the best success possible.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then speaking of your posts, man, like for those who follow you, I feel like your posts add so much quality information. You come across as being very direct, which I feel like is a good thing. But explain like the genesis and the beginning of why you started having these informational loaded posts.
Well, I'm very, very big into personal development, so that's one of my passions. I read a lot. I've been exposed to a lot of different personal development from different business and stuff like that. So, when I was competing way back in the day, I didn't know a whole lot. And it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of failed attempts. And I just remember the process being, looking back on it, hindsight's always 2020.
Mhm.
And I did so many things in my opinion, wrong. And when I started coaching, I know I'm not going to get to work with everybody. And there's so many people out there that follow me that I will never work with for many different reasons. So I try to put out there information, not to say, well, this is right, your way is wrong, or anything like that. It's just to allow people to think and look at themselves and say, well, maybe I'm doing a few of these things. I should try something else. So, I've acquired a lot, I've learned a lot, and I like to share that. And that was really the reason why I even started my podcast, was just to put information out there. And a lot of it is the misconceptions. I'm sure you've come across it many times when you meet someone and they have all these misconceptions about what dieting, getting a physique is like. I can't tell you how many times I'll run into someone that they know who I am, and they're like, man, I wish I had all day to live in the gym like your competitors do. And I'm like, they don't live in the gym. It's not about spending hours and hours in the gym, and they don't eat. They don't starve themselves either. That's the other thing people think. So I try to put things out there to help people, at least have them question and really, take self inventory on what they're doing. And if it can help them even 1%, then for me, that's rewarding.
Well, it's definitely helped me. And I can point back to one particular post when you're talking about like the changing in the body within a matter of like 4 hours,
Yes.
and how like you'll make these minor adjustments. And then, how people try to strike lightning in a bottle. I think that's the term you use during peak week.
Yes.
And I look at that and I'm like, dang, this is so crazy, because I was one that had, the misconception, like, again, like, you have to have like this perfect peak, and realistically it's about making the adjustments to getting the body to that. So again, like, I'm so appreciative of like the information that you provide, because in a sense it does ease, I can speak personally, my mind mentally, as far as like, okay, it doesn't have to be this one robotic way.
Yep.
It really doesn't. Like, and in fact, like, if you're, under good guidance and good coaching, even if you may start to swing the other way, the coach can reel you back in.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that specific post. Like, you don't have to talk about that competitor specifically, but how much stress or lack of, like, you have to do when you're making these adjustments to try to get your, competitor, one, to stay calm, but two, you making the adjustments and making sure you get them to where they need to get to.
Well, yeah, I know that the exact post you're referring to, because that is probably the one post that I put out there, and I can't put it out there enough, because we see it all the time. Competitors that look great 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, and then we see them come showtime, and we wonder, like, what happened, because they missed their landing. And that specific post, I talk about how it's usually from three different things that happens that causes that, if not all three of them, but definitely one of the three. And what happens is you have somebody who comes into peak week, and they immediately start like freaking out. They're like, I need to change things. It's peak week. And I'm thinking, like, well, why do you need to change all these things? If you're looking great, there's a reason you're looking great. How much water you're taking in, how much carbs you're taking in, how much cardio you're doing, what's your workouts like. So when they get to peak week, they want to change everything. They want to carb deplete. Well, if you're eating 200 plus carbs a day and you look phenomenal, the best you've ever looked, your conditioning, your fullness, what do you think by pulling all your carbs out is going to do? Just because you heard this competitor did this, that competitor did that, that doesn't mean you should do that. Okay. The other thing that happens is, so they pull all the carbs out, then they have to load them back in. And a lot of times throughout that process, as the show gets closer, they can never fill back out the proper way, because they
Mm.
completely depleted the muscle. And then the other two aspects is what they do with the water. Okay. And with the water, there's two sides of that. It's how much water you're actually loading and then pulling, but also what they do with the diuretics. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, you take someone who's drinking 2 gallons of water a day, of show week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, they want to pull it to a gallon. And then Friday, they want to pull it to a half gallon, just hypothetically. Well, by the time Saturday comes, your body knows what you're doing. So it starts to freak out, and your cortisol levels rise, and then it has a tendency to hold. So those are things that I always tell people. I'm like, if you're a week out and you're drinking 2 gallons of water, I'm not saying that's what you should have show day, but that's part of the muscle fullness that you're carrying around. To pull all of that out and expect to have the same muscle fullness, the body doesn't work that way. And then with the diuretics, it's the same thing. And then the other aspect, the third aspect, is far too many competitors want to put foods in the day before or the morning of that their body is not used to processing. They didn't experiment with these foods throughout their prep to see how they look the morning after, how much water weight are they holding, all these aspects. So those are things that competitors do that they really destroy their look. And I always say it's not about, trying to get 1 or 2% better. It's really, when it comes showtime, it's not screwing up your look. And I find,
Right.
that's why I said in a post, not that I recommend this, but most competitors would have been better off if they would have just went into the show like it was a normal day than trying to catch this lightning in a bottle voodoo type experiment that they do.
Wow. So even with, and that's crazy. So even with that, with trying to catch that lightning in the bottle, you have the tendency of like worrying about how others look like or how you look like. And again, like, you have athletes that again go behind their coach's back and then they'll do this and do that. Like, how do you as a coach try to keep the cortisol levels down of your athletes when they're dealing with all this stress of peak week?
Okay, that's a great question. And that I use a phrase that I learned way back in high school playing football. Our coach would always preach proper preparation prevents poor performance.
Five
Okay.
P's.
So going into the final week, I try to do my best to cross check everything for that competitor. I always say, don't wait till you're 2 days out to be worrying about what you need on stage, what your food's going to be like, what you need in pulling the water, all those different aspects. What you're going to have, that's going to stress you out. So it's about really properly preparing and having them know, like, this is what to expect, so that there's no speed bumps or anything like that. So I try my best to prepare them for what's ahead. Like even like when we're 5 weeks out, I'll tell them, like, this is what you can expect next week. Then when they're 4 weeks out, this is what you can expect. This is where your weight's going to be, so that they're not freaking out. Because if you don't lay out the expectations for them, then you have this wide range that they can easily stress out. And also, we all know they're listening. They got so many influences in their lives, whether it's somebody in the gym, somebody starts getting in their ear. And I had a competitor of mine that he actually coaches clients. We were talking about this just a few weeks ago. He was having an athlete the day before the show that wanted to have a certain type of junk food. And he was like, no, we're not going to have that. But the competitor was so convinced that he needed that junk food because his workout partner told him that. Now you're in a tough spot, because if someone truly believes that if they don't have this, and if you don't give it to them, they're going to stress themselves into looking bad. So you're in between a rock and a hard place. And that's why I always tell people, I'm like, look, whoever you're working with, trust the process all the way to the finish line, so that if things don't work out the way you wanted them to, at least you can say, I did everything the way he or she wanted it to be. So my whole thing when it comes to a competitor, it's laying out the expectations and letting them know. Because, for example, some athletes on Thursday are freaking out. I'm flat. I'm like, well, we're not peaking for Thursday. We're peaking for Saturday.
Right.
So don't be, so let them know on Monday, like, look, you're not going to like the way you look to the fullest on Thursday. So don't freak out on Thursday. And then Friday, we're going to slowly start filling out a little more. You're going to wake up Saturday morning. This is what you can expect. And then by this meal, so I have a funny video with Sadiq from last year at Pittsburgh Pro, that the morning of the show, he's literally freaking out, like, I'm flat.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So that's a perfect example,
Wow, that's crazy. I'm just picturing myself. I remember 2020 going into the North Americas, and I was so used to having specific meals, like, again, that Thursday, or no, the day before, like, all right, yeah, I'm expecting this, expecting that. But we had brought in a totally different look, because I had took 10 months, off. And then my coach was trying to advise, something else, and I freaked out. And I'm like, but why? Like, we've done this. Why? Well, you haven't been eating that. And then it turned into this whole thing where it was like, again, I had to reel myself back in from freaking out, because I'm going on stage tomorrow with, at that time, the biggest, show of my life at that time. And you're like, yeah, you're absolutely right. So I could have easily put my coach in this weird space had I not reeled myself back in, just over food. Like, it's crazy.
No, it's crazy. And that's why, to work with someone, when you work with that person, you have to buy in completely. And it's not even to say that everything they're going to have you do, no one's perfect. Okay. There's no perfect diet. There's no perfect coach. There's no perfect competitor. But when you work with someone, part of being coachable, okay, the word coachability is listening and doing exactly as they say. If they tell you to do 20 minutes of cardio and you're going behind their back doing 30 or 40, you're not doing as they say. So when they're adjusting things, they're adjusting it based on that you're following the plan. But if you're not, and if you're secretly eating almonds or doing whatever it is, you have to abide by that. And if you're not going to abide by it, then don't have a coach. Don't later blame the coach and say, well, I didn't come in right because of you, when you really wasn't doing everything in total. And that's why a lot of times, like, I'll have competitors will hit me up and they'll be 3 or 4 days out to a show. And they're like, hey, man, can you dial me in or whatever? And I'm sitting there thinking, like, no, just finish out with your coach.
Right.
Contact me on Sunday and we can put together a game plan. Because, if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 coaches, you have zero. You have nobody, because you're going to be all over the place, stressed out, and you will not be your best, period. You're not. Whether you win the show or not, I can promise you, you will not be your best if you're taking from multiple people and trying to put together your own type of prep. Like I said, if you're going to do that, you might as well just be your own coach.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, which one are you going to follow? Every coach has a different approach to how they want to land that plane.
Exactly.
So who are you really going to listen to? Because if you listen to one, you're not listening to the other four.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
that's pretty
Absolutely.
much how that goes, man. But talk to me a little bit about, getting Sadiq back on stage and, for the Pittsburgh Pro, and how he was in that space mentally. I know you hadn't, coached him for a while as far as show wise.
Yeah.
So how was that whole experience? I know you posted that little clip, but I'm pretty sure there's more to that.
Well, it was very interesting because him and we started working together way back in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very fascinating because, I had been working with clients up at that point on and off for about 8 years, but
Mm-hmm.
it was never really to the point of what it is like now. I haven't really built a brand or anything like that. And he was just getting into the sport. And this is before social media really took off and all. So we've been through a lot together, a lot of shows together and all.
Mm-hmm.
So, he had that hiatus. And when he came back going into the 2022 season, we put together a game plan to basically do the New York Pro, but we end up deciding to do Pittsburgh, which was 2 weeks earlier. And we were ready. I mean, I know his body so well, probably better than I know any competitor, because I've worked with him for so long.
Right.
So when we went into those final few days, just like pretty much every competitor is in their head. And I know this. So, like, just like I have to prepare them, I have to prepare myself because I know what's coming and how to deal with, and you have to deal with each competitor a specific way for that person.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got into the night before prejudging, this is what's funny. I specifically told him, like, we were eating, I had him loading up. We actually were doing burgers and fries the night before with
Okay.
cheesecake. And we've experimented with this so many times. I know that's how his body responds with it. So I told him, when you wake up tomorrow, now prejudging wasn't until 4 p.m.
Oh
So I told
man.
him, yeah.
Okay.
So I said, when you wake up tomorrow morning, you're not going to be crazy full. You're not. You're going to be dry, but we have to get about 3 meals in, maybe an extra one, till you have to be fully ready to walk on stage. So the next morning at 6 o'clock, we're in the posing room. The cameras are rolling. And he's sitting there, and he's like, I feel flat. I feel flat. I said, what did I tell you last night?
Right.
I said, I told you when you wake up, you're not going to be crazy full. He goes, no, you said we're not going to be crazy dry. And I'm thinking, and I'm like, if a competitor wakes up the morning of a show and they're not dry, they're not ready. The
Right.
issue is typically you got to fill out. Okay.
Exactly.
So I had to remind him, I'm like, no, I told you, you're not going to be crazy full. And like I said, we worked together for so long. He's like a brother to me, so we talk smack back and forth. But he one thing about him, whatever I tell him, he listens to it. Like he's as coachable as you can be. It just, he has these concerns at the moment, and he likes to hear the, like even after prejudging, we'll be finished, and I'll tell him something. I'm like, look, this is what you can expect, and he'll be like, do you really think that, like this and that? So, and also too, the pressure that he put on himself. I mean, he hadn't walked on stage in like 3 years. So I get
Yeah.
it, what he was dealing with. He didn't want to come back and have a bad showing, of course, so.
Yeah, that's amazing for you two to have that camaraderie, and him having the knowledge and still being coachable. And again, it's the chemistry you two have that kind of spoke through that video. Regardless of whatever he was saying, you were still reassuring him, like, hey, look, because again, like with him flipping out mentally, because that's just the athlete in us. Like we get in our head because we want what's best, but
Of
that's
course.
the reason why we hire a coach. Like we can't look at ourselves and and determine what's best. If we did, a lot of people would be coaching themselves in the first place. But for you to kind of stay in pocket, stay calm, and be like, hey, we've pretty much been here before. So, and you guys nailed it and took home the W. How did that feel?
Oh, it felt amazing. I mean, because honestly, that was, and at the end of the day, we all want to win, but it also, I always want to bring the competitor in the best they've ever been to date.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, not saying victories are not celebrated, but if I had a competitor win a show and I don't feel like they were their best to date, it really wouldn't be as satisfying. Whereas I've had competitors come in second or third at pro shows and look unbelievable. Yes, it's frustrating, but if someone's just better than you and they beat you, well, it is what it is. We did our job. But
Right.
that day we won, and he was undoubtedly the best he ever looked, to date. So, it was very, very good, very, very rewarding, and we're very fortunate. There was a point on that I was saying, like, the biggest thing what the competitors are being in their head. That's why you have to have a coach. And I always tell people this. I said, if I was competing today, I would still have a coach. And I'm gonna tell you for all the reasons we already brought up. But the other aspect is this: I actually feel the more knowledge you have, the more experience you have. If you're going to coach yourself, the more it actually works against you. And the reason why, if you don't know
Really?
a whole lot, you don't have a lot of things to choose from. Okay,
Right.
if you've been around, have tried different aspects of things, when you got to pull the trigger, those final weeks. Should I do more cardio? Should I do less cardio? Should I lower the carbs? Should I carb cycle? Should I increase the carbs? You will stress yourself into looking bad. If you don't have that second set of
Mm.
eyes that you can trust to guide you in, I just feel you will never be your best, because most people, and it's the same thing even with lifestyle clients, you're always going to sell yourself short when it comes to how much food you should eat. When I look at those that do their own diets, they're always under eating, because it's just the fear that, well, maybe I should just eat a little less. I'll be better off, right? If I eat a little less. And then on the flip side, maybe I should do a little more work. Maybe I should do a little extra cardio. So when I look at those that are doing their own plan, they're typically always overworking themselves and they're under eating. And when I tell them you're going to eat more food and do less, they look at me like I'm crazy. But I'm telling them, like, you're holding yourself back because you're out of fear of not eating as much as you should, and you're doing too much work thinking that it's going to make you better by working harder, when that's not necessarily the case.
Man, I feel like you're talking to my soul right now, man. That's great. And again, I think it is the fear. Like, you hit it right on the nose. I couldn't really put a word to it, because sometimes we're just in that moment of like, okay, I'm gonna just make this adjustment, and then just hopefully it works, because you feel like less is better, or in the gym you feel like more is better.
Yep.
But as I become, more educated and using social media as a tool, which I want to get to next, you start to learn that yeah, like, not necessarily less is more in the gym, but you just have to be efficient in what you're doing and getting the most out of, what you're doing, which contribute to your training style, hellacious training. Because I've implemented that a lot lately, as far as with myself and in some of my clients, and I have no problem giving credit, and I feel like it definitely works as far as some of the things that I've seen you implement.
I
So,
appreciate
man, yeah, kudos to you, man. But as far as social media goes, when you competed, it wasn't big. In fact, it was irrelevant.
it.
So
Yeah.
you only had like the magazines and people you were close with at the time. How do you feel social media is playing a role on the mental side of like competitors these days versus to not having it back when you were competing?
Well, social media there's a lot of good and then there's a lot of bad. The good, let's start with the good. The good, compared to back when I was competing, we had no social media. And as a trainer and coach, it was very hard to get your message out there and to really build a brand, because typically back then all you worked with was local clients, because
Mhm.
there was no social media. You can't have someone see you in New York or in Europe or in Australia. That just didn't happen.
Right.
So, so from the aspect of branding and getting your message out there and being able to connect with people from all over the globe, I think it's been amazing from that aspect. Like, my business, I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done if not for social media. Okay. But the opposite side, the bad side, I can tell you this. When I got into the sport at the turn of the century, when you like all we saw, like you mentioned, was in the magazines. Like all the pros we followed, you would get the magazine once a month, whether it was Flex or Muscular Development, Muscle and Fitness, and you would just like follow these guys through there, read the articles, and when you would see them at a show, the star power that they had was unbelievable. And all of them, you could hear Ronnie Coleman, Jake Carl, all of them will talk about this and tell you what I'm telling you right now, that today it's not the same, because when you see a pro, you like, hey, I saw you post on your story what you had for breakfast today, and you're talking to this person like, you no longer have that. And you like, and that's why if you go back in the day, the contracts were bigger, the star power and all was bigger, because you only saw those people in the magazines or when you saw them on stage, and it was like it came to life. Where nowadays everyone is all connected. So I think, and the other side of it is that a lot of things that's out there on social media is not accurate. Okay. From how people look to with some people, I've known pros throughout the years that they'll take pictures all within 2 months, and then they'll release them all throughout the year. And people are thinking like, oh, this person looks like this in the off season or this and that. And it messes with people when it's like that picture might've been taken 9 months ago, and they're posting it today like it's right now. So, I always tell people, use it for what it is, but don't put everything into what you see on social media. Like I always tell people, I'm like, competitors will show me, oh, this person looks this good 3 weeks out or 5 weeks out. I'm like, well, when they walk on stage, I'll believe what they look like, not what they posted up, what they look like 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, 6 months out, whatever, so.
Wow. Yeah, I'm definitely was a victim of that. Like, especially just getting into the sport in 2019. And then the following years when I started like really like following a lot of these pros, which I had no business doing because I wasn't even a pro yet. And like, oh dang, such and such looks like this and such looks like that. Dang, how am I gonna get to that? And then that's when like the whole overtraining and under eating thing tried to, creep into your mind. So yeah, there's pros and cons to it. The con of like comparing yourself to others,
Yep.
that's terrible, and I was definitely a victim of that. But like you said, like you'll believe it once they get on stage. And I developed that mindset literally last year. Like, okay, it doesn't matter what you post, like I'll see you when I see you. Type of thing. So, and I'm trying to teach, like some of the clients and athletes that I train and coach now, like, okay, like you can follow all these people, but you really don't even know what they look like until you see them on stage, and you might not even see them on stage. So like, we'll see how that goes, man. But
the thing with that, which is funny, is that I would tell you almost every competitor, whether you call it the massorexia thing, everyone seems to be bigger on social media. Like I've heard this so many times. When you see them in person, male or female, you're like, man, I thought that person would be bigger than what they are. And you see them and you realize, wow, like they're not that much bigger than me, but you've been freaking out, stressing out, looking at their pictures, thinking that this person is so much more developed than you or has you on size, when in actuality that may not be the case. And the thing you said about comparing, I noticed that a lot with amateurs. And I talked about this on a video earlier this year, that be careful, it starts with awareness. Number one, be aware of where you are. If you're just starting out, you're in your first year, you have no business comparing yourself to someone who's been doing this 10, 15 years. Like you haven't even put the time in yet under the iron in the dieting. Like a classic physique competitor that's in his first year, that's 2021, should not be looking at CBUM saying, well, how much, could I get him in the next year? It's like, dude, you haven't even been through all this yet. So it's good to have your sight set high, looking down the road, but also have the awareness of where you are, and that you got to get through steps 1, 2, 3 before you get to 10, so because it can be discouraging. You could set yourself up for failure if you do that.
Oh, it's definitely discouraging again. So for you as a coach, when you have like maybe first time competitors come in, I'm pretty sure you do an assessment like, hey, what are your goals? What do you want to do? And they say, hey, I want to turn pro within this year. I want to do this. I want to do that. How do you reel them into a realistic approach as far as what you think is possible for them based off your assessment?
Well, what I always do first when I take on anyone is evaluating what they currently look like. And
Mm.
now some competitors come to me, and I would say a lesser percentage already have a show picked out.
Okay.
And like I would probably say 20-30% of them will say, hey, I have this show on this date, whatever. And then the next question for me, it's okay, well, why are you picking out this show? What was your last show? So I kind of get that out of the way. But the other, say 70-80%, they will literally tell me, they'll say, look, when do you think I can be ready? So that's when I come in and say, well, look, your legs need to come up, or your shoulders need more rounded, whatever it is for that person. I'll lay out what their strengths are, and then also what their weaknesses are, and what time frame I feel it's possible for them to be ready to do a regional show and to contend to not only win their class, but to win the overall. So for me, if you can't win the overall at a regional show nowadays, different 10, 15 years ago, but nowadays, if you can't win the overall, I truly feel you have no business going to nationals. Okay. Because if you can't win the overall at a local show, well, what chances you really have on a national stage to go there? I mean, I'm not in the business of just bringing people to nationals to place 12th. Like,
Right.
That's not a guarantee that everyone I bring there is getting a pro card, but it's very rarely I ever have anyone go to nationals and they're not in the top 5, because I'm not bringing somebody there that's not on that level. So it's about setting those realistic expectations, laying out what they need to work on in the time frame. So that's kind of how I handle that. And rarely I do get those that really put the cart in front of the horse. Like I had a guy, no names mentioned, this was years and years ago. The Olympia had just ended, and I had 3 guys all in the top 15. They've all battled it out. And he literally told me that, he goes, this dude's never competed yet. He's like, next year, I know I can take all 3 of them. And I'm thinking like, okay, you first have to do a regional show to qualify for nationals. You have to go to nationals and get a pro card. Then you got to go to a pro show and win. Then you go into the Olympia. And if you think you're going to do all this inside of 1 year, less than a year, so I had to really like bring him down to earth. But that's a rare type thing when someone comes into it that big headed,
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. And even with me first coming in, like I actually had no clue you can turn pro. But then once I found out, like I found myself definitely putting the cart before the horse, where I was just like trying to just rush it, rush it, rush it. But it wasn't until I literally was like, you know what, you gotta really, again, the time under tension thing doesn't necessarily mean that one like set or whatever you're doing that exercise for that day. That's a long period of time, like how you mentioned, CBum. It's been a lot of time under tension, a lot of work being put into his physique that has, gotten him to this level, including a lot of these competitors, including like yours, like Sadiq. Like he's been training, I don't want to use the word forever, but that seems like what it is. So for someone to just try to come in and say, like, yeah, I want to get there in a year, like, yeah, that's tough. Like you might do your research.
Well, you do your research, and like when I got into the sport, for example, you only had bodybuilding. Okay.
Right.
So when I was a late teenager, I had a mentor that I remember he told me, he's like, look, dude, it takes 10 years to build a pro bodybuilder physique. We're talking the big boys. So because I fell victim of that. I was 19 years old and I'm like, I want to look like Jay Cutler. I want to look like Ronnie Coleman. And he's like, pump the brakes, dude. You're freaking 19 years old. Like it takes you 10 years. If you have the genetics, you're gonna get there. Some people will never get there. So I had to come to reality, like patience. You got to put the work in. This is a marathon of marathons.
Man.
And if you ain't willing to go through all of this, you're doing the wrong thing. You better take up something else, because bodybuilding is not for you. So now, and that's what I do like, the fact that, throughout the evolution of the sport, they've added men's physique and classic physique and then all the female divisions, because it has brought a lot of individuals to the sport that probably would have never got into it, because it took 10 years to build a pro bodybuilder physique, so, and that's the difference. So it's a lot of these divisions, and there's always exceptions to the rule. Yeah, there'll be somebody in men's physique, first year competing, go win, get a pro card. Yeah, that happens, but that's rare. And for those out there just getting started, you have to realize that that's not going to happen to everybody. You got to be willing to put the time in, the work. You got to be willing to lose. Some people don't realize that you're going to lose more in this sport than you're going to win. Like, this is not a team sport where you're going to win over 50% of your games. If not, you're horrible. There are a lot of great pros that have all lost way more than they won. So, you got 25 people on stage. Only one person's going to win. So just because you get third or fourth place doesn't mean you're a failure. You have to have that awareness and the realization of your expectations. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to fail before you even start competing.
That's actually a great concept. And I'll lead into that with this. Why do you feel competitors do not have that mindset versus the other side of it, where they chase, like, okay, I gotta win or it's nothing, or I need to be validated by this trophy or whatever the case is? Because like you just said, even if you finish third, like, you're not a failure, but some may view it as that. So why do you feel like it's not more so what you're saying, but it's the other side of it?
Well, there's probably so many aspects to that. We live in a day and age that everyone wants everything yesterday, and everyone wants a trophy. And I've said this on many podcasts before. People are not willing to be baked. They want to be microwaved. They're not willing to put the time in and deal, go through all the pain and thresholds to really, mature and get the physique. They want it all now. And we see other sports, if you don't win, you're nothing. But those are team sports where it's 50-50. One team's going to lose, one team's going to win.
Yes.
This is a sport where, in actuality, you have 27 teams on stage at one time. Okay? So, because it's that person, it's their coach, it's their opposing coach, it's their family, their training partner. It's a whole bunch of people, and you got so many up there. So, like I said earlier, you have, as long as you're improving and you're showing up at each show getting better and better, that's the main thing. And you have to realize that more people are going to lose. So if you're only doing this to win, I'm telling you, you look at anybody, look at Ronnie Coleman, look at Jay Cutler. If you look at their track record, they have lost more shows than they won. And you're talking the all-time great of greats. So if they lost more than they won, what do you think you're going to do?
Right.
And it's have that realization that I always say, focus on progress. If you're getting better at each show and if you keep competing, your number is going to turn up. They're going to see you more and more. If you don't compete, if you're not seen much, your chances, it's the law of averages, you're not going to have a great chance of success. If you compete a lot, you're getting better. The judges see that. You're getting the judges' feedback. That's the recipe to win in this sport. But if you're not willing to go through that, you're not going to make it.
Yeah, you got to be willing to go through that. And that was the conclusion I came to this year. I did tell I was going to take my time this year, take the time off, and really assess what I wanted to do the following year. And yeah, I'm prepared to kind of go through that gauntlet, because I got caught in that mindset too after my pro debut. It was like, dang, my pro debut sucked. Like, dang, what am I going to do? Is this even for me? Like, all those like crazy questions, when realistically, I just need to get back to work.
Well, yeah, and it could be very demoralizing because, for example, you take an amateur that does 3 amateur shows and say someone who turns pro, most likely they had a very successful time on the amateur stages.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say they did 3 shows, they probably won 2 out of 3 of them. And the one they didn't win, they got second or third place. Mm-hmm. This person goes and gets a pro card, okay, whether it's first time out, second time out. Then they hit the pro stage and there's 25 pros and they end up getting a 16th. And now they're thinking like, damn, like this is all foreign to me because I competed only before as an amateur. I won pretty much everything. And even if I lost, I was second or third place. How do you handle not even being, hate to say the word, relevant in a contest? But you got to forget, you got to remember, you're going to be against all pros now that went through the same thing you went through. And it's not that you're a failure. It's like you just said, get back to the drawing board, get back to work and focus on your weaknesses and, use every outlet you can. Get around judges, get critiques. The more you're seen, the better your chances are. And that's why everybody I work with, I'm like, you got to be talking to the judges and seeing what they want you to work on. It's not about what you think you need to work on. It's what the judging criteria, what they want. And then when they see you that you went to work on that and made those improvements, you're going to be rewarded for it.
There you go. And that's the mindset I had to get into, because like for about 4 or 5 weeks, I was in that other mindset. Like, I don't know if I should be doing this. I had a great amateur career, I'll say that, turned pro, and then all of a sudden, like, you're back down at the bottom. And which is something I knew already, but to have it slapped in my face like that, it was just like, but yeah.
Until it happens. When it happens, then it's dealing with that. And I've said this before, not that I ever condone losing, but I remember talking about this, and that I said I almost rather a competitor as an amateur lose their first show. And I say lose, like get second. Like I said, it's not that, I wanted somebody to lose. Of course not. Because it makes them appreciate winning more. And because if all you do is win, when you lose, it's going to be heart-wrenching. And I'm not going to name this person, but I had a pro that this was almost 10 years ago, won the overall at Nationals. And we did one show before that, so 2 victories right out the gates. Took 3 months, went to pro debut, only 3 months after getting a pro card. Got second place at the pro show, and literally like completely gave up the sport. Said, I'm done. This ain't for me, because everything was fixated on winning. Like, so that's what the point I'm alluding to. If all you know is winning, you don't know how to lose. And like they say, win like a champion, lose like a champion. You got to realize, and that's the thing, like even a competitor of mine, whether they win or lose, at the end of that show, both are motivating, and we're still going to do the same thing. We're going back to the drawing board, whether we won the show or not. So that should always be the mindset, no matter how the outcome is of the show. Look at what went wrong, what needs to be corrected, and how far of the gap it is. Those who are beating you, what do they have that you don't have? Okay. And focus on that. It's not about just getting bigger. It's not, it's about filling in those weak points. Those are the mistakes I made when I was younger as a up and coming competitor. I just wanted to blow up in the offseason and get big. And I remember like older guys would tell me, it ain't about how much weight you gain. If you're not filling in the gaps and fixing those weak points, just because you're getting bigger, those holes are all going to still be there.
Yeah.
So focus on your weak points and bringing that up, and you're gonna steadily move up. If you're making progress, you're gonna move up.
And yeah, you hit it right on the nose, man. And I thought that too, even in men's physique, which is stupid, like just blowing up for no reason. And that's why I said this was the first year that I felt like I behaved like a pro. Like you can even try to behave like a pro as an amateur if you're staying disciplined, stuff like that. But just having that mindset, like, no, like you need to be intentional at all times and kind of stay in that mind frame, even in off season. Because I was gaining like 30 pounds out of nowhere within like a month, just doing stupid stuff, like thinking I'm eating something that I'm never going to get again, which is always going to be there. So yeah, it's stuff like that, man. But one of the last questions I wanted to ask you is that with you coaching pretty much all divisions, bikini all the way to pretty much bodybuilding, what are some of the biggest differences, if any, that you see that some of these divisions go through, like mentally?
Well, I think mentally, they all divisions are mentally challenging, every aspect, even from a bikini competitor. The only difference is that there's less things that they're enduring than, say, someone who's a bodybuilder, from hormonal changes and all these different things that is self-induced, that can mess with your mindset, your emotions, etc. But the difference is just like, for me, every person I work with, like I tell them all, I'm like, it all comes down to nutrition. So no matter, the difference is between an 80-pound bikini competitor, it's how we're going to design things. What are we trying to accomplish? The training, like when it comes to bikini, I would say it's the least division I like to work with nowadays, because it goes against my philosophy. of what I
Mm,
do. Okay. My
okay.
whole approach, it's eating more and doing less meaning from the cardio side. So for
Okay.
example, and hellacious training was built on the leg training. Okay. That's what I specialize in. Granted, I design everything, but
Mm-hmm.
so when I take on a bikini competitor, I can't put them through the leg training because they're going to outgrow bikini. They're going to legs are
Mm-hmm.
getting too big. They have to do tons of cardio to whittle down. So that's against my approach, and they have to eat very little, which is also against my approach. So
Oh, that's
um,
tough.
yeah, so it's the past few years with the evolution of wellness, I've had a lot of success with that, and then of
Mm-hmm.
course figure and all. But the mindset, look, the challenges that to me, the challenges of all this, it's like we talked about, it's knowing where you are at what juncture, whether you're 8 weeks out, 6 weeks out, 4 weeks out, having somebody that you trust telling you you are where you need to be, and then fighting the daily battles, which are all really mental. It's like you said a few minutes ago. You're going to want certain foods. You're going to want certain junk food that food's not going anywhere. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's not. We all get in this moment, and I've done this for 20 plus years. That like you feel like if I don't eat this food today, the food is going to be wiped off the face of the earth or something. Like it's gone. So not freaking out about that, and then also
Man.
trusting the process. That is the biggest mental hurdle. It's being with somebody you trust as a coach and trusting the process. If you can do that, you'll be fine if you're
Okay.
coachable. And that's the other aspect. Do what that person tells you to do and follow through. And guess what? If it doesn't work out, if you feel like you're not even close to being your best, then maybe you need to change your approach, work with somebody else, who whatever that decision, but at least you did it 100% and you have a true evaluation of what that outcome was.
Absolutely, man. It's so hard for athletes to completely trust the process, even if you have that chemistry and that camaraderie with your coach. That second guessing thing. That's why, like, my approach is literally always, like, you know what? I don't want to have to think. Like, I'm paying you to pretty much help me think in a sense. So whatever you tell me I'm gonna do, because then, like you said, like at the end of the day, like, hey, I did everything. What else should we have done? Or whatever the case is. So yeah,
One thing,
I totally get that.
one thing I want to add to that, and all those out there competing, if something is not going right with your coach, meaning if you don't like how you're looking, whatever, make sure you're being transparent with your coach. Make
Hmm.
sure, because a lot of times competitors don't voice that opinion. And then 2, 3 shows later, they up and leave the coach when they never stressed what was going on. None of us, the client, the competitor, or the coach, none of us are mind readers. So if something is not working, just it's not wrong. I know a lot of times some coaches get offended when someone questions them if they have a
Hmm.
question about something. So I'm really talking to coaches. Don't get offended if someone asks you a question, but be prepared to break it down. Like tell them
Right.
why, the reason it's this, you're doing this instead of this. Just don't say stick to the plan. And then for the client, make sure you're willing to ask the questions. If you have concerns, don't wait for things to build up and explode, and then you're no longer working together when this is something that probably could have been resolved. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a two-way street. Like, it works both
Yes.
ways. So you're right.
Yep.
So in conclusion, and you dropped a lot of gems, man. I hope y'all listening. But in conclusion, I definitely want to continue this dialogue, especially on the coaching side, because I feel like a lot of the whole community can benefit from this as far as what you guys are seeing, on the athletic side, especially from you, because you come from that anyway. Like, you were, competing back in 2002. So, but who would you recommend to kind of enhance this dialogue more so from the coaching side, to try to come on here and just give their perspective as far as what they see, and offer just words of wisdom?
From a coach, an actual coach,
Yeah. Mhm.
Milo Sarkev.
Hey, oh, one of the gurus. All
Yeah,
right.
that would be. He would be, like, I mean, I respect. I mean, there's so many coaches I respect,
Hmm.
but if you want me to name one, from the science and breakdown aspect and just the mindset. I mean, his nickname, they call him the Mind. So there you go. Yeah. So yeah, he would be the one that I would, I've had him actually come on my show last year, and it was just, I mean, we could have, he even said it at the end, we could have talked for hours, you know? So yeah, I would definitely highly recommend him.
All right, I'll definitely reach out to him for sure. Mr. Guidry, thank you so much, sir,
Hey, I
for
appreciate
coming
you.
on here and just sharing your wealth of knowledge, man. I much appreciate it. Hopefully when I do come to Texas, I would love to go through one of those training sessions with you. I've been saying this to my guy Brian Kobe. I know he went through one. I was like, yo, I gotta go. I gotta
Yeah,
go.
I trained him on and off for about a year and a half, so
Yeah.
he definitely went through it. Yeah, he knows all about it. He didn't do too many of the leg sessions. In fact, I have a video. Him and I both laughed at this. Like he's literally crawling out the leg press on the floor, and he can't even get up. But so he's like, yeah, I'm men's physique. I'll just stick to, you can train me on all the upper body, back, shoulders, chest, whatever. So, but Brian's a great guy, man. Great dude.
Yeah, he is, man. But hopefully one day I can get out there, man. But appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right. See y'all in the next one. Peace.